Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us. As Tara mentioned, my name is Ebony Heaven. I will be going over the agenda this evening, talking a little bit about how the department is structured, and then handing it off to the division managers to introduce their respective divisions. On today's agenda, we're going to be covering the City HR's mission, vision, and values, how our department is structured, and then again, each division manager will come up and give you a little bit of information on their respective divisions. The Human Resources mission is to deliver programs and services to customers which result in a positive experience. Our vision is to be recognized for exceptional business practices and customer service, and we value and model inclusive behavior by respecting and valuing coworkers and customers, taking pride in what we do by delivering first-class service, demonstrating the department values through transparent practices, and communicating openly and timely while respecting confidentiality. But most importantly, we try to have fun. We spend a lot of hours every day with the coworkers that we work with, so it's important that we enjoy the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. A little bit of information about the types of services that we're responsible for. We oversee the recruitment and testing processes, classification and compensation, benefits, retirement, loss prevention, workers' compensation, equal opportunity, employee relations, personnel transactions, and diversity and inclusion. While some human resources department are formatted and structured in more of a generalist capacity, the city's human resources department is structured into 6 specific divisions. The Office of the Director oversees the administrative functions for the Human Resources Department. There's also Benefit Services, Diversity and Equity, Employment Classification and Development, which has additional programs underneath, which is the employment classification piece. We also have examination development and organizational development as well. There's Labor, Leaves, and Civil Rights. They have the program areas of labor relations, equal employment, and ADA programs, and EEO. And then there's risk management, which oversees environmental health and safety and workers' compensation. Next, I'll hand it off to Aaron.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. I'm honored to be here and talk a little bit about my program, the Labor Relations Division, that administers labor relations, the Office of Civil Rights, which deals with equal employment opportunity issues, and also our leave administration program that addresses issues that employees may have where they need a protected leave under like the FMLA or pursuant to the ADA. So labor relations is really responsible in the city for negotiating our labor agreements with our recognized employee organizations, which sounds really boring but is really exciting. And so if you've ever been a member of a union, then you understand the importance of those labor agreements and you understand the importance of the enforcement of those labor agreements. The Labor Relations Division deals with grievances that employees or the unions may bring up during the course of an agreement, or we help disambiguate questions that management may have in a particular area about what the contract allows employees to do. We also deal with wrongdoing, accusations of employee wrongdoing. So if there is an investigation to be had or discipline to be administered to an employee, the Labor Relations Division would help guide those departments through that discipline process. In addition, we also help the city develop and administer its policies and negotiate those policies with the labor unions. And as you can see from the slide behind me, there are nine organizations that represent employees within the city of Sacramento. The second program that my office administers is our EEO program. Many of you are probably familiar with the federal and state rights that you have for protecting you as different classifications that you may belong to, whether that's gender or orientation or race or age. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office enforces a similar policy that the city has it does establish a lower bar than the law does. This ensures that the city of Sacramento can provide a workplace that is free from harassment and discrimination and retaliation based on any protected class. And then lastly, my office administers the leave administration program. And this ensures that certain benefits, certain leave benefits like sick leave are being used in a manner that is congruent with the city policy. It also establishes a mechanism by which employees can submit for protected leaves, whether that's pregnancy disability leave or they've been injured. We do it all except for workers' comp leave. That's an entirely different division that I think Patrick will talk about. And that concludes my presentation. So with that, I will hand it over to Samantha Hardy. Thank you.
Good evening. Again, I'm Samantha Hardy. I am the Benefit Services Manager. The Benefit Services Division administers health, welfare, and retirement benefits for city employees and retirees, and we hope to do that in a manner that supports our city's efforts towards recruitment and retention and is designed to meet the diverse and changing needs of our employees and our retirees. Some of our employee benefits include medical, dental, vision, basic life insurance, and accidental death and dismemberment, long-term disability, the employee assistance program, and a 401A and retiree health savings plans. All of these employee benefits are offered or administered in compliance with the negotiated city labor agreements. Also, in total, between our active employees and retirees, currently we have about over 8,000 customers. We consider our employees and our retirees our customers. So 8,000 right now is what we're managing the benefits for, plus any dependents they have on the plans. And this equates to right now about $68 to $70 million in the basic medical, dental, and vision and life insurance benefits. And something unique about us is we do not have CalPERS Health as a local public agency in this region. That's kind of rare that we're not participating in CalPERS Health. The city has its own medical plans. We negotiate those medical plans directly with the medical carriers, contract directly with the medical carriers, and this gives us a little bit more negotiation power to manage this ourselves and not have CalPERS Health. We offer a variety of voluntary benefits to our employees. Again, these are things that we hope attract, recruit, and retain employees to want to work at the City of Sacramento. Retiree benefits, so we offer medical plans to our retirees, both traditional copay plans like Kaiser, $25 copay. We also offer Medicare plans for those retirees or their dependents who reach Medicare eligibility, which is traditionally age 65. We also make sure we offer a Medicare plan that's available across the country and in the 5 U.S. territories for our retirees who live outside of the region. And then we offer dental and vision. Both of those plans are available across the United States as well. And then for those retirees who are not living within one of our plans, our labor agreements provide for something called cash in lieu, where if they're eligible for a certain amount of city retiree health contribution, they can get that money in cash to pay towards them enrolling individually in a plan somewhere else, not on the city's plan. And there's requirements they have to go through to prove that, to make sure that there's no taxation issue with that retiree health contribution that they receive. Our retirement plans, something that probably isn't known too much anymore, is the city actually has 2 retirement systems. It has its original SCRS retirement system. That's the second one listed. We still have 1 active employee that is covered by SCRS. This means this employee has worked for the city in a full-time capacity consistently prior to 1977. And I just saw her recently do a presentation to council, and she is in our finance department. But in 1977, the city switched to the CalPERS retirement system, and right now we have over 4,500 retirees or their beneficiaries receiving that CalPERS pension, and then we have about 983 active employees right now today eligible to retire from the city. So with about 3,800 to 3,900 active employees that are enrolled in CalPERS, you can see that's a big number for us to plan for in terms of succession planning. Other retirement plans that we think are retirement type plans that are important to attract and retain our employees are retiree health savings accounts. That helps employees put money away in a tax-free advantage basis and then can be withdrawn tax-free to pay for future medical eligible expenses. And then we have a 401A plan and a 457 plan. 401A plans, that's mandatory participation. That too is outlined in the labor agreements. And then we have a voluntary 457 plan, deferred compensation plan. So two other retirement type vehicles that allow our employees to put money away towards retirement. And lastly, if anyone in here has ever heard of pension reform that came in 2013, the city of Sacramento is officially in that place where we have more active employees that are enrolled in what's called CalPERS PEPRA. They fall under the pension reform than our CalPERS Classic members. And we're seeing that happen really across the state at this point for most local government's active employee population. They've all made the shift to more PEPRA employees than CalPERS Classic employees. And with that, I will turn it over to Ebony Heaven.
Hello again. So I am currently the interim HR manager for the Employment Classification and Development Division of the city's Human Resources Department. I'm going to shorten that to call it ECD because, as you can tell, it is a mouthful to say. Within ECD, we oversee the full life cycle recruitment process, we oversee classification and compensation, and organizational development. Our goal is to really provide applicants with a great recruitment experience and also provide existing city employees with training opportunities and developmental opportunities that allow them to want to stay in the city of Sacramento and develop our workforce. While some may think we just kind of make things up on the fly, we don't. We actually have several authoritative sources that guide the work that we do. We are required to follow employment and labor laws, the city's charter, civil service board rules, and then the memorandums or understandings, which are the agreements between the city and the unions, as Aaron mentioned earlier, and then of course city policy as well. One of the questions we get fairly frequently in ECD is, what is civil service? It's essentially an employee who is employed by a government agency that is employed to serve their jurisdiction that they work for. For example, the city of Sacramento is the city of Sacramento. Those employees are entitled to a certain set of rules that we are required to follow. They have the same effect as law. Non-civil service employees are not required to, or they're not covered by those same rules, meaning they're exempt from them. Under the employment umbrella, we oversee the city's recruitments and facilitate them from the very beginning. So from the department's request to fill a vacancy, we are looking at whether or not they can do that. We are looking at developing and working with subject matter experts to develop the appropriate examination for that classification if it is a civil service recruitment. We are drafting the job posting, screening for minimum qualifications, and then referring those applications over to the department for further consideration. Something that I would like to mention is we get this question all the time regarding who selects people for interviews. Once the applications are actually referred to the department, it is the department's responsibility to facilitate the interview process. So that's reviewing applications, selecting them, and then facilitating the full interview process. Once they identify a hire, then those transactions come back to us in the form of a personnel transaction. We facilitate in ECD the personnel transactions for the entire city of Sacramento. So that is a document, essentially, that documents how an employee moves their employment through the city, whether it's a hire, a promotion, a termination, or a pay rate change. All of those things are documented in the form of a personnel transaction. We're also responsible for advising departments on how to manage their positions, and there's 4 true opportunities to do that within the city. One of them is by adding a position during the fiscal year mid-year budget process, or doing an add delete, which is where they're removing one classification that they no longer need and adding an additional one. The other option is to do a reclassification, which I'll talk about shortly. And then lastly is keeping the position vacant for cost sharing that they can use to facilitate trainings for existing employees or possibly use to do an out-of-class opportunity to develop their existing staff. Regarding classification and compensation, we are responsible for developing, revising, and archiving city classifications. To do so, we are required to work with both unions and the Civil Service Board to make sure that they're approved at all levels, HR, the Civil Service Board, and the unions, if it's applicable to do that. When we are conducting classification study, we are essentially studying a position where an existing incumbent exists in that position. We study the position, not the person. So that's an important distinction to understand is when a department feels that the classification that they have no longer meets their needs, it is our job to determine whether or not that position is appropriately classified. And lastly, we also conduct compensation studies. This is where we look at additional comparable agencies within California and determine whether or not our salaries are at market rates. And before we can begin work on doing those studies, we do have to have labor relations approval. Sorry, Aaron. And then the last piece of our area is organizational development, where we are responsible for administering, developing, and sourcing citywide training programs. We have a development team that is quite great. They also offer consultative services to city departments where they can help them with developing team building activities, figuring out ways to keep employees engaged. And they also have really large programs that they do to assist the departments in mentoring their existing staff, identifying leadership opportunities, and then providing supervisors with additional resources as well. And that concludes my presentation. I'm gonna hand it over to Pat.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pat Fleury, Risk Manager for the city. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So risk management, you all know what that is, right? Everybody knows what it is? No one knows, right? I figured that. So let me tell you what we do in 5 minutes. We have 3 units. EH&S is the first unit, and that does employee safety and training for the city. And then we have a workers' compensation unit for the benefits for injured workers for the city employees. And then we have a risk administration unit that handles budgeting, liability claims, and insurance. So let's dive into each of the units a little bit and tell you what we do. So employee safety training programs and safety programs and the training is a big piece of the EH&S unit. So not only written programs that comply with all the standards that OSHA requires, but also the required training that goes along with that. That training is done in person and also via some of the online training programs that we have as well. OSHA compliance, you guys all know what OSHA is, I believe. There's a lot of regulation we've got to comply with, and that's a big piece of the job. When OSHA comes out for a complaint or a serious injury, we handle that whole process as well. DOT and DMV compliance refers to, DOT is Department of Transportation, so that's the commercial vehicles, the big trash trucks, big utility vehicles. They have drug and alcohol standards and programs they have to deal with, licensing programs, so we oversee all of that as well as DMV compliance for the regular drivers like myself who drive a regular car. And the last thing that they do is pre-employment physicals, and that some of the jobs in the city are pretty physical, a lot of lifting and so forth. We make sure that they have programs that the doctor will evaluate them, make sure they're safe to do the work, and they can actually physically do the job that they're being hired for. So that's risk administration. And then workers' compensation, we handle all the claims with internal staff for injured employees. We have 2 units. One handles police and fire claims, and the reason for that is police and fire have certain presumptive injuries in California. So if you're a policeman or a fireman, you have cancer or you have a heart condition, it's presumed compensable. So it's pretty much automatically you pay for that claim, whereas the rest of our employees like us, we wouldn't have that privilege. So we have one unit that handles those claims to deal with the complexities of those type of injuries. And then we have adjusters that are assigned to different departments. They get to know the managers, the employees, the light duty opportunities, and we find that makes the whole process work a little bit smoother. We handle about 550 new claims, new injuries a year, and that's workers' comp. And then the last unit is risk administration. So budget and financing, we're an internal service fund. What that means is everything that we spend, we charge back to the departments. And so we're kind of all have some skin in the game. We all want to keep the costs down because the less that we pay in claims and related excess insurance costs, the less we charge the departments. So we all try and keep the costs down because it benefits the whole city. And then our budget's about $60 million. And we also purchase the insurance policies for the city. That's excess liability, property insurance. We have about $1.5 billion in assets we insure, workers' compensation, excess insurance, fine arts insurance for all the Crocker artwork and artwork throughout the city. And we also have a crime policy in case there's internal theft or external issues with crime, pollution policy, and special events for city council events, that sort of thing. And we also do the liability claims administration. So all the claims filed against the city we handle, and we get about 600 claims a year on average. And the last thing we do is handle insurance requirements and contracts. We spend a lot of time talking to departments to make sure the contracts we have with vendors and contractors have their proper insurance requirements. And then we make sure that we have the actual insurance to back that up in case there was a claim against the city. So we spend a lot of time on contracts and then insurance verification as well. And that concludes my presentation. Ami?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ami, and I serve as the Diversity and Equity Manager. Really just I'm going to quickly go through what the Office of Diversity and Equity does. Really want to kind of emphasize the mission is to move with urgency and purpose to embed equity and inclusion and racial equity into our policies, our protocols, and our practices, and that includes our workplaces. So we're currently comprised of 3 full-time staff, including myself. 1 full-time staff focuses on strategic workforce equity, Larissa Wall, and our second is equity analyst that focuses on the external efforts of our office, and that primarily centers around our SCORE initiative. And so really wanted to highlight the 2 frameworks that guide our decision-making, because DEI and racial equity can be very esoteric, but to ground those concepts, there's 2 frameworks that our office works with. And the first one is the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmark Model, and then the second is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which is a national initiative. Those 2, the first one is our DEI platform, the second is our racial equity platform. And so the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmark, here I would highlight, while we want to make sure that we are looking at individual behavior, our office is primarily rooted in building capacity, competency, and knowledge around these concepts so that we have and we encourage and we foster systemic change. And that means looking at our policies, our practices, and our procedures, even customs, even how we interact with one another. So capacity building is a huge part of the strategic planning effort. So this instrument, and I definitely would highlight, take a look at the links that were placed in the PowerPoint, especially in your current roles and what you do now. They could be very helpful. One of the reasons why I like this source is it's free. One of my favorite F words, free. It's a free resource that we can use, and you can utilize it and apply it to any type of organization, size, or industry. So it's a great resource. I'd highly recommend it. The other thing that I would like to encourage of this model is not only does it focus on inclusion and diversity, but an intersectional aspect of diversity. We don't come to the workplace and in our spaces with just 1 or 2 identities. We have a variety of invisible and visible identities, and so the city strives to make sure that all of those identities, when you work and serve the citizens, that those are embraced and that those are leveraged as talent, and that you're contributing in a positive way not only to your growth, but to the city. The second framework is from the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And this framework is essentially normalize, organize, and operationalize. This is the theory of change that we utilize. This theory of change primarily guides our racial equity work. And what I mean by racial equity, we're not just focused on race, but we need to focus on race in order to change systems, practices, and procedures, but it's often usually the thing that we're the least equipped to talk about, but also we need to address it if we're going to have structural change. So this platform gives us a way of normalizing in conversations by routinely discussing and analyzing, organizing ourselves, structuring our work, our analysis, applying a racial equity lens. Did we talk to community? Did we consider data? How are we making our decisions? That's the organizing element. And then the operationalizing is systematizing those decisions so that we're doing it and it is clearly embedded in the work that we do as decision makers. And so we do that by using racial equity tools, and that's the operational piece. One of the major initiatives that we have, and we've been undertaken since 2019, is part of the GARE is the result of having a race, gender, and equity action plan. And that really guides our workforce equity. We really believe that if you're going to represent the city, you need to reflect the city you serve. So that's what we're striving to do. And so these are some of the activities that we've engaged in to build in that structure, from building equity teams to choosing outcomes for those equity teams and working with them to develop that on an ongoing basis. In May of this year, we convened an equity convening, the first of its kind in the city, where all of the equity teams from across the city came together and discussed results-based accountability and gained foundational understanding and learning around racial equity. We also just completed our 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge, which we had approximately 170 staff work for 21 days on concepts around being anti-racist and advancing racial equity. And then currently, we're taking an equity pause where we're doing a deep dive look and racial equity application to our current training programs and how we can make them better to fit the roles and the current changing dynamics of the city workforce. Our external and emerging work that we are undertaking, it really began in 2021. We've established a racial equity committee, which became a first permanent committee of its kind in 2022. We are working with Race Forward, another great organization I'd highly recommend you take a look at, for our SCORE initiative, and you can also learn the scope of work there. It stands for Sacramento Centered on Race and Equity, and that's working with community leaders to drive address historical harm, but also develop a plan on how we will advance racial equity throughout the city and through the region, we hope. That's the vision. We also have in the works an online GIS tool to help embed racial equity. That's something that our current equity analyst is leading. We feel that it's really important to equip staff and community with tools on how you can embed racial equity in your decision making, because that is how we're going to make change. We are also working on a racial equity repository that would be available for the community to see equity work that is happening across the city. The city is a big place, a lot of departments, a lot of divisions. So to understand how equity is happening across the city, we're creating this repository that we hope to launch in November, not only for our purposes for increasing collaboration and connection within the city structure, but also for community to know where equity work is happening. And then lastly, we're developing a scope of work for a racial equity study citywide. This would be really looking at the historical lens of how the city has played a part in creating inequities so that we can address them. And we also hope out of the study, the goal is to create indicators that we could use as decision makers from the council to staff on how we are making progress in measuring our work around fostering racial equity. And thank you for your time and attention. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.